Hello, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for today's Blogger Media Roundtable. My name is Staff Sgt. Dale Sweetnam, and I will be moderating today's call. Today we have 3 soldiers who served with the nation's newest Medal of Honor recipient, former Staff Sgt. Clint Romesha, during the battle at Combat Outpost Keating, October 3, 2009. We have on hand Captain Stoney Portis, First Lieutenant Brad Larson, and Sergeant Thomas Rasmussen. Before we hear a few opening statements from the team members, we want to discuss a few quick housekeeping items. Once the floor is open for questions, please state your name and organization affiliation clearly. Also, we ask that you keep your questions succinct and to the point. If you're not actively participating in the conversation, please keep your phone muted to eliminate any background noise. Keep in mind, we're here to talk about the Medal of Honor, Staff Sgt. Romesha, his actions and leadership before, during, and after the battle, so please keep your questions on topic. We'll have time to basically run through anyone who has any questions in the order they've dialed in. And we'll definitely have some time after everyone has the opportunity to ask some questions for some follow-up. So without any further ado, hand it over to Captain Portis.
Hi, this is Stoney Portis speaking, and I was the commander for Bravo Troop 361 Cav from September 2009 until through the entirety of the deployment and into 2011. I'd just like to say before we get started that we're here today and came to D.C. to support the Romeshas and the Army in recognizing him for his valorous service. It's been a huge event for the troop with a lot of pride and the teamwork that it took that day to beat an overwhelming odd. So I'll just tell a little bit about these guys that are with us today and the actions that they conducted to contextualize the battle and the service of Staff Sgt. Romesha. So about 6 in the morning on the 3rd of October 2009, Combat Outpost Keating, which was in the Camden district of Nuristan province, came under a complex attack by enemy forces estimated at around 300 fighters. The fighters occupied the high ground on all 4 sides of the COP and initiated the attack with concentrated fire from B-10 recoilless rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, Dishkas, mortars, and small arms fire. In the hours that followed, Staff Sgt. Romesha, which we affectionately refer to as Ro, would perform the actions that would earn him the Congressional Medal of Honor. And so with us here today are some of my soldiers, formerly my soldiers, who previously served alongside Clint and other soldiers from Bravo Troop, 3rd Squadron, 61st Cavalry Regiment. We've got Sergeant Thomas Rasmussen.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Rasmussen. I'm still at Fort Carson in 1st Brigade, originally from Mountain, Minnesota.
And then we also have First Lieutenant Bradley Larson.
Hello, Lieutenant Larson, formerly Sergeant Larson. I'm currently a Chinook pilot in the Nebraska National Guard.
So these 2 gentlemen just had some extremely valorous service, and I'm going to take a minute to brag on them, and it'll contextualize their actions in association with Clint. So Sergeant Rasmussen actually was then Specialist Rasmussen, and despite being fired upon throughout the entire day by enemy rocket-propelled grenades and machine gun fire, then Specialist Rasmussen was the point man for an assault team that pushed out to reinforce positions. He was the point man for the assault element that cleared 2 key buildings from Taliban forces, and he was the point man of one of the teams that was led by Sergeant Romesha to retrieve 2 fallen comrades. Sergeant Rasmussen displayed uncommon valor throughout a tumultuous day, and knowing the grave danger he was in, routinely placed himself in front of enemy fire, even though those who had gone before him had sometimes been shot and taken from us. So knowing that grave danger, he continued to place himself in front of it while supplying battle positions and assaulting multiple enemy-held buildings. And for this, he was awarded the Silver Star. First Lieutenant Brad Larson, actually then Sergeant Larson, was the gunner on a vehicle battle position when the assault began, and he took immediate RPG strikes to his position. Additionally, accurate sniper fire sent bullets bouncing off the turret, and under this heavy fire, Sergeant Larson courageously remained in his turret and continued to engage with the 50 caliber machine gun. He actually reloaded twice and fired close to 1,000 rounds from his position before precision sniper fire struck him in the head and the arm, and an RPG disabled his weapon system. So despite that, he fell back down into his Humvee and got back up to reman his Humvee, and thank goodness for the protection of his Kevlar, was able to make it out of the battle. His actions led to the safe withdrawal of 3 soldiers from an endangered position. He actually carried one of those guys on his back, a casualty to the aid station, and joined the assault team with Sergeant Rasmussen and Sergeant Romesha, and for this he was also awarded the Silver Star. Unfortunately, Sergeant Armando Avalos isn't able to be here with us currently, but another stellar trooper, and we're thinking of him. And so what I'll do now, just a little bit about myself. I am, or was the commander that day, 2 days before the attack. I was in a helicopter that was fired upon by enemy sniper fire and had to land in an alternate base. And so on the morning of the attack, I jumped into observation post Fritchie on the top of the mountain, and we fought our way down with the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force, which was an infantry company. And by the time we got to Combat Outpost Keating, it was about 6 p.m. that evening, and Bravo Troop had sustained multiple casualties but continued to hold the camp and beat back an overwhelmingly numerically superior enemy force. So with that, I'll hand it off to Sergeant Rasmussen. Sergeant Ras.
Yeah, like I said, I'm still at Fort Carson. I was with Romesha pretty much the whole entire morning. I had a position that I was at. I was helping Private Faulkner with the 50 cal machine gun, relinking ammo belts together for him so he could continue to suppress enemy fighters. And then throughout the day, Romesha, scooped me up, and we just went around the cop, securing random buildings, trying to take the cop back from the Taliban force.
It's important to note, he won't say this, but I will. Sergeant Romesha had sustained some pretty serious injuries from shrapnel received from a rocket-propelled grenade, and continued to fight, for several minutes before Sergeant Rasmussen actually got to him and performed buddy aid, applying bandages to those wounds and enabling Sergeant Romesha to continue to fight that day. So we really have Sergeant Rasmussen to thank for providing him the first aid that he needed. I'll pass it off to Lieutenant Larson now.
What are your questions, gentlemen?
There we go.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We're going to hand it off to Chuck Simmons from the America's North Shore Journal. Do you have any questions, sir?
I do, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your service. I have some. I'm looking at the reproduction that DoD has up of the COP, and I have some geography questions that should be fairly short. To your south was a pretty steep ridge. Is that correct?
The south was the switchback.
Yeah. I mean, everything was pretty steep, sir. To our immediately south were the switchbacks that would lead you up to the mountain, and then kind of southwest would be southeast was the waterfall and the diving board area, what we referred to as the diving board area, and that was a pretty steep terrain as well.
Okay, and then to the north, is that a riverbed or a gully, or what's the bridge cross?
It crosses a river. It was actually 2 rivers that met at one point, and the bridge is what we use to get back and forth to either side of the river every day.
Okay. Does the river provide an actual barrier to assault, or is it shallow enough that it wouldn't?
It was a pretty significant river. So Cop Keating was at the convergence of 2 major rivers, the Londe Sin and the Compcustosi or Nuestani rivers, depending upon which tribe you ask. It bordered that river, and so in some manner it provided an adequate barrier to the north and east. However, alternatively, in some ways, that day, because of the nature of the attack being surrounded 360 degrees by high ground, in many ways it acted as a fixing position on the soldiers of Bravo Troop. Okay,
and my final geography question, to the opposite end of the camp from the switchback, beyond the Tactical Operations Center, what are those buildings?
There would be they were the ANA barracks. It's where the Afghan National Army stayed on that side of the camp.
Okay, and then can you talk a little bit about the ANA on that day, and also could you mention what the Latvians were up to?
Hi, as far as the ANA, just kind of keeping this focused with the gentleman here and their accounts from their respective lanes during that day, and as far as and Clint Romesha and the overall effort that was put together to help repel the enemy.
The Latvian soldiers that day were a huge enabler to us. They took a lot of initiative upon themselves to pretty much throw themselves in the fight and offer their services whenever they could. They were right next to us when we were clearing rooms and, giving us sniper rifles and ammo when we needed it, and, they were absolutely a huge help that day.
Yeah, the Latvians came and actually fought with the men. You had a Corporal Dobolins who fought with us as a sniper, so a very helpful asset to have for the fellas. And then First Sergeant Lakis, L-A-K-I-S, who also knew the eastern side of the perimeter quite well because they were associated more with the Afghan National Army as their mentors. And then, for that matter, the two gentlemen here, including myself, to be frank with you, we just did not have much operational knowledge with the ANA that day. They were largely focused on the western portion of the outpost, and so the eastern portion would have been where the ANA were located.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Jacob Rogers from the Gazette. Mr. Rogers, did you have any questions?
Sorry about that. I had to put it off mute.
No problem.
Well, I was hoping to talk with, First Lieutenant Larson. I haven't been able to talk to you yet just about that day, and you had kind of just a unique perspective being out at that LRAS for a while. I guess first of all, when you guys first got in contact with Romesha, what was it like to finally be able to hear from those guys again and be back in contact with the rest of the soldiers?
It was very nice to be back with Romesha and Raz after being pretty much pinned down in that Humvee for 6 hours. It was good to hear that we were still doing well as a group. And once I linked up with Raz back up in the talk after we dropped Mace off at the aid station, Lieutenant Bunderman told me that Romesha could sure use some help at the Shura building, and Raz was there to kind of lead me and guide me there. And once we linked up, it was back to business as usual, doing what we had to do.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned Mason. I remember yesterday Obama brought him up to start off his speech. Your guys' actions that day to try to save him. Could you just talk a little bit about, I guess, when you got out of that LRAS and you started making that dash? What was going through your mind as you're making that run over there?
Well, we timed it with Lieutenant Bunderman so that we would have an Apache gun run, and maybe, I can't remember if we had a fixed-wing gun run going on at the same time. Because I told him we're going to need some serious covering fire because we had a lot of open ground. We had to get Mace out of the Humvee onto a stretcher and get him to the aid station, and all I could think of was, how fast can I run? Turns out fast enough.
Cool, man. Well, one last question. I guess some of the guys were able to head out to see Mace this week over at Arlington on Sunday. If you don't mind me asking, how was it to be able to visit him again before all the ceremonies?
I'd never been to Arlington, so just the sheer size and numbers of people that are buried there was overwhelming. And then actually being able to see where Mace was buried and a couple of the other people that I knew their names, I won't mention them, but it was pretty amazing. felt it a little more that day than I normally do, because it really sunk in that day.
Jacob, as you can imagine, this reunion for Black Knight Troop has been full of a lot of different emotions. Certainly we're proud of Sergeant Romesha and happy for him, but it's also a time of solace and solitude. And so, just at this point, while we are here, to congratulate, to have the camaraderie and revisit the stories and the memories, we can't help but remember those that fell that day. Sergeant Martin, Sergeant Gallegos, Sergeant Kirk. We had Sergeant Hart out there, Specialist Scusa. Of course, Specialist Mace fortunately made it out of Keating alive, but then, because of his grievous wounds, wasn't able to make it through surgery. And Specialist Griffin, PFC Thompson. And so it's been a cathartic few days for us as well, visiting with the family members who, in coming, they've really been able to grab hold of maybe a part of their sons or husbands that they had not previously been able to do, and then in the memories that we share, it's also kind of continuing to honor their sacrifices and those of Clint and his family, and really the greater Army family. Because, at the end of the day, people are our Army.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Mr. Lopez, our news, do you have anything? Okay. Mr. Simmons, did you have any follow-up questions?
Yes, I do. Trying to get a sense of distance. LRAS 2 appears to be the furthest out of the from the part of the base. Can somebody give me some kind of distances that'll give me some perspective on this photo I'm looking at?
This is Lieutenant Larson here. From the aid station to LRAS 2 was approximately 200 yards, going by the Shura building and by the Red Platoon Barracks to the aid station. It'd be about right around 200 yards.
Okay, and an LRAS is a Humvee with a gun on board?
This is Captain Porter speaking. LRAS is long-range scout surveillance system. It's an optic that enables our reconnaissance efforts to view long-range targetry. But yes, there would have been a machine gun on that truck as well.
Okay. Well, I see two items labeled truck and two LRASs, but they're all on the Humvee platform?
This is Captain Portis. Yes, sir, that's correct, and we refer to those affectionately as LRAS 1 and LRAS 2.
And then Stand 2 Truck 1.
Yeah, Stand 2 Truck 1 and Stand 2 Truck 2.
Yeah. And they remained in place during the fight. They didn't maneuver.
This is Sergeant Rasmussen. We used them as more of a guard post than anything else. They had been left over from previous units, and they provided good cover and protection, and you could mount some pretty heavy weapon system on. So a lot of them weren't up to par engine-wise, mechanically-wise, but they definitely served as good towers.
Okay, and then you guys are cavalry, so I'm not really sure how many soldiers are in a troop. Can you give me some idea how many Americans were on the base at that time?
This is Captain Portis, sir. It's hard to give you one specific answer for across the board with the Army because it depends on the type of brigade that you're in, to which type of cavalry troop that you have. What I can tell you that day is that there were 52 U.S. soldiers at Combat Outpost Keating and an additional 20 U.S. soldiers at Observation Post Fritchie. Now, just to put into perspective, OP Fritchie is doctrinally a part of COP Keating, although geographically OP Fritchie is on the top of the mountain, so there's quite a separation in terms of terrain between the OP and the COP. So you're looking at 52 and 20 respectively, and then we had about an additional 12 soldiers back at Forward Operating Base Bostic, which served as a headquarters and logistics node to push and receive supplies. And then during that time, the Army's stance is that we're trying to send roughly about 7 to 10% of any one unit on R&R. And so we had a handful of guys on R&R leave at that time as well.
Okay. Now, the outpost you refer to in the reconstruction I'm looking at, it looks almost like the overlooking the overlooking Keating is a mosque. I'm sorry, sir. Well, they're showing a building with a blue dome way up on top.
This is Captain Porter's again. Remember that you're looking at the Hindu Kush Mountains, where the mountains go up well above 22,000 feet. Combat Outpost Keating was at the very bottom of the valley at the convergence of the two rivers, so everything around it was on high ground. To our north and west was the village of Ermul, which is where the mosque that you're seeing is located. Okay. So Observation Post Fritchie was at the top of the mountain immediately south of Combat Outpost Keating. The terrain that you're looking at, that representation, is primarily of Combat Outpost Keating, and the only reason for that is because that's where Sergeant Romesha was that day, and so that graphical depiction is in relative to his actions.
Okay, and within the outpost, I'm looking, there's barely any cover on the, what would that be, the western side of the outpost. There's a handful of buildings and the roads. There aren't a lot of trenches or bunkers or anything like that, right? Am I seeing this correctly?
You asking what the situation was like with cover and concealment?
Yeah. That whole western side looks pretty wide open.
Yeah, this is Sergeant Rasmussen. It was. We'd use it as a trash pit, which is where we put all our trash and burned it all. So we couldn't really live or occupy that side unless we were doing, perimeter checks or stuff like that. So we kept that area pretty much off limits, and we had some HESCO barriers surrounding that side on the road to, keep anybody from coming in and out, and some concertina wire on top of that.
And which buildings did you guys have to clear? The Shura building right at the gate?
Yes, sir.
And some of the buildings further to the west, or?
That's right, the ammunition supply point and what they refer to as the Afghan security guards location. ASG HUD is what we called it.
And that's on the other side of the river, right?
No, you're confusing that with the Afghan National Police Headquarters. That would have been on the north side of the river. The ASG and the ASP, the Ammo Supply Point and Afghan Security Guard position, those were both almost in the nucleus of the camp. If not the nucleus, say the western perimeter of the buildings. So not the perimeter, but the buildings.
Okay.
It was pretty much the whole western side of the camp, sir, is the area that Sergeant Romesha had to clear and get control of again. All the latrines that were closed off, were, the ammo, they had taken control of the ammo supply point. We had to get that back, and pretty much every building except for the building that the mortars were occupying, the Taliban had taken control of. And
Sergeant Romesha, had he had any sniper training or marksman training to do some of the shooting that he appears to have done?
So our standard training during train-up for deployments is marksmanship training. He was always an expert marksman. I cannot comment on whether or not he received sniper training, though.
Well, the citation and the narrative mentions the use of a Russian sniper rifle, so that I find that fairly impressive.
This is Lieutenant Larson. Sergeant Romesha was very well versed on multiple weapon systems. Whether it was an American sniper rifle, if he had that in his hands, he could have used that. The Russian Dragunov, he would have no problem using that. It's a pretty simplistic weapon.
A lot of times, this is Captain Portis again, he and the other NCOs and junior officers would take it upon themselves in their downtime between missions and going up on guard to cross-train on weapon systems. And so whether it was using the mortars or the sniper weapons, or even being able to coordinate with the Latvians, there was always some kind of cross-training going on just to ensure that we had a form of redundancy on our capabilities on the outpost. And that's a common technique among Army units.
Okay, and one last question, gentlemen. Is there a helipad in the COP?
This is Lieutenant Larson. No, there is not a landing zone inside the COP. It would be across the river, where the point where the two rivers meet across the bridge. It's approximately 70 yards by 30 yards in the dry season, and a lot smaller when the river rises.
And what? So you didn't have an immediate medevac available then?
No, sir. This is Lieutenant Larson again. We had to wait until Captain Portis and the QRF had walked down the mountain to help us secure the outpost. And then once we had more people, we cleared the LZ, and that's when they called in for the medevacs for the wounded and the fallen heroes.
And was Sergeant Romesha medevac as part of that?
No, sir. This is Captain Portis. Sergeant Romesha was not medevaced. In fact, only the KIAs were the ones that were immediately medevaced, and then those that were seriously injured. So we had a lot of walking wounded that continued to remain on the camp and fight.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Rogers, Jacob Rogers, did you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, if possible. I was kind of wondering. I mean, yesterday when you guys were in the East Room, and Obama was there, he draped the medal on Romesha. You guys sitting in the crowd. I mean, what was rolling through your mind when you saw that?
This is Sergeant Rasmussen. It was one of those culminating moments that you hear about, and we've been waiting for it, and we've been going through all these steps, talking to everybody about this moment to happen. And when you actually see it happen, it's I don't know how to describe it. It's like a great sense of pride, and also brings a lot of closure to what happened that day. And I think that's the way it is for a lot of people. It's finally a chapter that it doesn't necessarily get closed, but it helps the healing process, that people are actually recognizing this man for what had happened that day, and then to have Obama stand up and recognize the families of the fallen, and the rest of the unit. It was just a huge honor, and I think it was awesome. It couldn't have gone any better.
Yeah, so Lieutenant Larson, how about you, man?
Sir, for me, it was a well-deserved recognition of an American hero. He wasn't accepting the Medal of Honor for himself. He was accepting it for all the soldiers that were there that day, all the soldiers that are in the Army, in the Marines, in the Air Force. He was accepting that medal as a true American hero, and it was just a great honor to be asked to join him that day, or yesterday, in the White House.
Cool. Kind of curious. I mean, he spent some time with Obama in the Oval Office, and when you guys had that large reception, I mean, Canada was there, it sounds like, and you guys had basically the top brass of the nation. I mean, how was Romesha handling all this? And what was he like yesterday?
This is Lieutenant Larson. He was just his quiet self, trying not to. He wasn't taking any credit. He was just acting like his normal self. Anytime somebody would say anything good about him, he would accolade that if it wasn't for the soldiers beside him and his brothers in arms, his family, that he wouldn't have been able to do it. So he took it very well. He's a soft-spoken individual, and he just takes it with grace, I guess.
Mr. Lopez, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, I assume you guys all have moved on to different units now, right?
Yes.
How do you guys stay in contact with each other? How often do you call each other, email each other? Forever?
I know, like the really, really close friends, like, Lieutenant Larson and Clint and Armando Avalos and guys like that, and Brown and Harder, I talk to them at least once or twice a week, just, on the phone, just catching up and, making sure everything's going good and,
How long has it been since the unit split up, since you guys got fought there in Afghanistan and split up?
better part.
Well, we arrived we returned home in May 2010, and, within the months that followed, easily 25% of the unit began to disperse to other posts across the Army. The months that followed that, I would say, a great percentage, easily another 10 to 15% exited the Army. And so it was almost immediately, and I think that tends to be the sense when a unit redeploys, that there's some stability in who's who for a little while, and that really helps with coming home and reintegration. And then everybody progresses in their careers and in their jobs and goes on to other units typically.
When you guys left the Bravo company, and you move on, is your need to stay in contact with your buddies from this conflict, is it different than like the other units you've been in the Army, I guess, stateside?
For me, this is Lieutenant Larson, if anybody's listening. Bravo Company 361 Cav is the only unit that I was ever in. The day I got to Iraq, I was Sergeant Romesha's driver, and the day I got out, he was my second sergeant still. I would never left his team or his platoon or his section for 3.5 years.
So you said Iraq?
We were in Iraq in 2007 together. And then we trained up for Afghanistan, and him and I had been training each other, or he'd been training me for so long that we never really had to talk on the radios to know what the other one was going to do. It was pretty amazing how I could just tell what he wanted me to do because he had trained me for so long.
You were always an officer?
No, I was a sergeant most of the time. I got out of the Army, joined the Nebraska National Guard, became a lieutenant, and just graduated flight school. So I was a sergeant.
You've been working with Romesha for a long time now?
Yes.
How do you keep calling him forever?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he comes and helps us work cattle. He comes down to my house a couple times a year. So.
Excellent. Well, were there any other questions? Maybe somebody joined the call late? Okay, if not, I want to hand the floor back over to Captain Portis for some closing remarks.
Right, so the discussion kind of ended asking about, kind of what B Troop means to us, or if it's different from any other Army unit. And I think that one of the special things about the Army, and it being a people-driven Army, is that wherever you go, you're going to have the unique experience of humanity, right? And that sounds really cheesy, but another way of saying that is, people are what drive this, not necessarily anything else. And so when you've got guys like Sergeant Romesha or Lieutenant Larson or Sergeant Rasmussen, and the other 100 soldiers that served with Bravo Troop fighting, you've also got their families back home supporting them. And so for us, to be here has been very special. I would argue, though, that it's been equally special to be here with Tammy Romesha or his children, or the Gold Star families of those who have fallen. But at the end of the day, I think that there's a spirit about this troop that the guys have a very close bond because of this battle that they survived, and because of that, they continue to be a decisive group of people that go out and take the lessons learned in the spirit of the experiences in 2009 in Afghanistan to their new units. Or like with Sergeant Rasmussen, he continues to progress up the ranks in the 3rd Squadron, the 61st Cavalry, and so he's continuing to teach those younger soldiers beneath him the lessons which Sergeant Romesha taught him years ago. And so there's kind of a really big circle of life here of lessons learned, and we just can't say enough how grateful we are to our soldiers and how proud of the Romeshas that we are for this medal, which is very well deserved. He won't take any of the credit of it, but I will tell you that he is a superior leader for this Army. So with that, I'll pass the floor back to you, Sergeant Sweetum.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in the call. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today to speak on such an important issue to the Army and our nation. For additional information and resources about Staff Sergeant Clinton Romesha and the Battle of Combat Outpost Keating, please visit www.army.mil/Medal of Honor/Romesha. Again, thank you, everyone, for your participation, and this concludes today's roundtable. You're free to disconnect.